welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is the most horrific thing you've ever woken up to? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was a little kid and had a dream that I was in an earthquake. When I woke up, my room was shaking, like bed moving across the floor shaking. I ran into my parents' room and woke my mom up. She told me it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I was scared to go back to my room because if they hadn't felt it, why was my bed bumping across my bedroom floor? It wasn't against the wall. When I went back in where it should have been, it was maybe 9 inches away. I thought I was going insane or there were ghosts. I barely slept. Next morning, Mom apologized because there had been an earthquake. 8 years old, not being able to open my eyes, had an infection or something, and a bunch of gunk glued my eyelashes together. I thought I was blind. 19 years old, an empty apartment I'd never been to before. Got super drunk for New Year's Eve and got a ride to a different party with people I'd met that night. Woke up while they were out eating and remembered nothing. Looked at the pictures hanging around and recognized nobody in them. Woke up to my family panicking because my dad didn't come home from work the night before. About an hour later, a cop came to the door and told us he had died in a car accident. My dad sometimes went out after work with his friends and came home late, so we didn't think anything of him being late. The sound of EMS firefighters running down the hall to resuscitate my stepdad. I was having a sleepover with my 2 friends when one of them tapped me awake. I sat up to see down the hall several firefighters. My 2 friends and I were huddled on my bed, wondering what was going on. We were 13, and they came down with a stretcher with my stepdad on it. My mom was dressed in a rather revealing nightie and no bathrobe. She was so stressed and frightened that she didn't even realize this. My friends were totally freaked out. Until that moment, they did not realize my stepdad was dying of a terminal illness because we didn't talk about it outside the family. 2 weeks later, my mom and stepdad were killed in a car accident day after Christmas. Sad times, man. Sad times. You know, sometimes these stories will surprise me with a positive ending. And then you have this story. Well, sorry. 2 things. 1. Ambulance lights outside of our house in the middle of the night and my mom waking me up saying, "Hey, we're leaving for the hospital. Your father had a heart attack." 2. During a particular hurricane a while back, I was asleep. Must have been 3 a.m. or so. So when my phone's emergency weather alert, super loud, went off with large text saying, "Warning, tornado sighting in your area. Take cover now." 1. My mom had been fighting cancer for 2 years, and this was her second round within 10 years. It had just spread to her brain, and we knew her time was short. Around 5:30 a.m., when I woke up to my sister calling me, we never talk. I just instantly knew. She was calling me to tell me my mom had died. I was supposed to start the 6-hour drive to visit my parents later that morning. Oddly, the final blow was a heart attack, relatively quickly, and in her sleep. 2. 8 months later, the same sister called me again early in the morning to tell me my dad had suffered a major stroke and was alone for about 3 days in his farmhouse before anyone found him. 6 years later, he's still alive, but his quality of life is a fraction of what it was, and he's become angry and depressed. Both were in their mid-60s when these happened. I try to talk to my family much more these days. My husband busted through the bedroom door screaming hysterically that his mom was killed at work. I was thoroughly confused and then went into kind of shock. Drove 80 miles per hour half asleep to the site where she was killed, and she was still there. We didn't know. The coroner was just putting her in the vehicle. We get around the side of the truck to get her things out, and I see this huge puddle of blood on the ground. I don't think I've ever been so heartbroken. Worst way to wake up by far. Loud knocking and yelling in the hallway, followed by smoke. The unit down the hall was on fire, and firefighters were evacuating us. The funny thing is, the alarms did not go off when they should have. Yet, there had been false alarms and tests every month at the most annoying times. I shared a hotel bed with a friend. The other 2 people in the room were a couple, so they got the other bed. I woke up to a pillow wall between us. Of course, I was worried that I tried to spoon him or something, but it turns out I mumbled, "F Jeff Gordon," and punched him in the back of the head. Happens. When I was about 12, I woke up covered in blood. I screamed and ran downstairs to get my mom. She checked me over and was confused. There was no apparent source. We go upstairs, and there is my cat, who I thought was male, in the middle of giving birth. Horrifying at first, but I thought it was sweet. She felt safe and comfy enough to give birth on me. I don't think Mum was too impressed we had to get a new bed though.
So, like I said before, you are sometimes surprised by the outcome of a story. This one, though maybe a little gross for some people, had a good outcome.
I got pretty sick towards the end of high school. I was never hospitalized, but it was bad enough they were testing for just about everything. I could barely eat, and breathing hurt. I woke up at about 2 a.m. one night completely unable to breathe. Going from sound asleep to wide awake and not breathing was terrifying. I'm not sure how long it was before I drew a breath, and I'm sure it felt longer than it really was, but I was sure I was about to die. When I was about 10 years old, I woke up to my brother, who was about 19 at the time, rolling around on the bathroom floor, groaning and crying. He had snot dripping down his nose and was clutching his stomach in utter pain. It was the first time I ever saw him cry and show that he was really hurting. And that's what really terrified me, because he always made himself out to be the strong guy who never cried. Turns out his appendix burst, and he had to be taken to the hospital. Stayed home from school because I was sick with the flu. Woke up to 2 SWAT team members with machine guns, one of them asking me if I lived there. Turned out the neighbors were stealing our internet, and one of them had been accessing child porn. They thought it was my father who was the owner of the account, and that he was a child sex trafficking situation in our basement. They were watching the house for months, and weren't expecting me to be home, just him. That was fun. I was 17 or 18. It was 2 a.m. My mom came in my room and turned the light on. I had no idea what was going on. She said to pack a few things. We're leaving. I was really confused, so I asked her what's going on. Before she could say anything, I heard the front door slam upstairs. I heard very heavy footsteps and a very loud crashing sound, and then I heard my stepdad yell my mom's name in the loudest shriek of anger. I looked at my mom and saw the fear, and honestly, I felt the same thing. I was frozen, and my mom stepped just outside my door. I heard booming footsteps reach the bottom of the stairs. My mom sounded scared, and like she was crying, and he was saying some awful things. I can't remember anymore, I was scared. I just got my school bag and filled it with clothes, and left the school stuff. I was planning on going to school the next day. The yelling got crazy, and I got my stuff. They argued upstairs, and I got with my brother, who was also scared. My stepdad yelled he's driving away, and me and mom begged him to not drive. He was drunk AF. He left, and I asked where are we going. He came back and lashed out that we'd let him drive drunk. Me and my brother stayed in my room, scared. Then mom came, said go to bed, and it was quiet after that. I got on the net, talked with friends, and sobbed. I've never been so scared before that. Back when I was in college, I had a habit of sleeping odd hours because of the weird times I would do my homework in. I would go in around 7 in the morning and then come back around 1, 3, and 5 and promptly pass out on my couch, my bed, to take a nap. I got a lot of grief from my mother from napping too much, and I still don't care, so there's that. At the time of the story, I'd been feeling under the weather since I went to class, so the nap was well deserved. I opened the window a crack for fresh air and tucked myself in. My head, where I usually put my feet, right next to the window. What I did was when I was sick. I remember being in the depths of sleep when there came a tickling at my lips. Unconsciously, I rubbed at it with the back of my hand. Looking back, that was easily the worst mistake I've ever made. In seconds, my mouth was filled with the most inhumanely nauseous taste imaginable. I spit and gagged, jerking out of my blankets and wiping my face off. In the throes of my blind panic, I see a tiny shape in the corner of my vision crawling along my blanket. My stomach dropped with horror and recognition. A Chinese stink bug had made its way into my room via my window and had sprayed into my mouth. When I touched it as it inched along my lips, I consumed mouthwash. That day, like I was a sorority girl doing spring break shots in Miami Beach. I scrubbed my teeth and tongue with my toothbrush so hard you wouldn't have thought I was trying to clean up a bloody crime scene. The aftertaste lasted for hours, and my tongue was practically numb. To this day, I have a hard time blocking out the memory of the taste whenever I see one. People complain about the shitty smell, but the taste is something to be feared. I was house and pet sitting a few years ago for my grandmother. My grandfather had died a few months back, and my grandmother had gone to visit her sister in Florida. I knew every inch of my grandparents' house by heart, seeing as I'd practically grown up there. It was a small house, and the hallway that led to the bathroom and bedrooms ended at a full-length mirror that was there to make the hall look longer. So, I went to bed in the guest room, and during the night, I had to get up to use the bathroom. I turned my head, and there was somebody inches from my face looking at me. I was just totally overwhelmed with shock, too startled to even scream. Then I moved my arm a bit and see the other person do the same. I realized there was just enough light for me to see the mirror. I was looking at my own goddamn reflection. I felt so stupid, but it still took me a while to stop shaking. Back in 08-ish, when the recession hit us really hard, we had a horrible infestation of roaches in the house. I woke up in my room, which had never been badly infested. It was mostly the kitchen and bathrooms, with 2 giant roaches, water bugs. I heard that's what they're called, crawling around on my face. I screamed and went to sleep in the living room on the couch. Also, my aunt woke me up one night in 2012 to tell me my mom was going to die that night. She had cancer. She did. Now that I'm typing these out, I'm realizing how traumatized I still am. I was a kid at scout camp. We were working on our wilderness survival badge. For the last piece, we had to build a fort and sleep in it. While we were building the fort, the scoutmaster would come over to inspect and give advice. Things like, you might want to make that opening a little smaller. That way the wolves and coyotes can't get to you. It's up to you though. So we'd take it down and start over. Then, you may want to put more branch and leaf coverage so you don't get crapped on by birds. So we'd start over. Finally, we decided to dig out what would be the inside and build around it. The opening was smaller, but opened up once we got inside. It was tall enough for us to sit up in. We had also covered the top, so most of the sunlight was blocked. We went to sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night, branches close enough, they scratched my nose, and something warm dripped on my face. I tried to shuffle over to my buddy to wake him up and see what was going on, but he wasn't there. But there was a growl. I rolled over and felt under me, and I felt fur. I froze. There's a wolf in my fort, and it ate my buddy. It was resting before eating me. I pulled the fun harder and growled, got louder, and I got hit in the face hard by something. So I rolled over, put my hands to the branches that were the ceiling of the fort. I took a deep breath, pushed with everything I could muster, and rolled back off the way. The fort collapsed on the wolf, who had hollered in pain, who was actually not a wolf, but my friend, who had just had me pull his hair and collapse in front of him. My bad. Waking up to the slow creaking off my door opening at 3 a.m. After about 1 minute of this, I jumped down from my bed. It was a bunk at the time, and once I got down, the door slammed open, and I screamed as loud as I could and ran for the light switch. Once the lights were on, it turned out no one was there. It was not a sibling or a pet, because everyone was asleep at the time. I only know that because they got woken up by my screaming. Broke up with my ex about 6 months ago. She had undiagnosed mental issues. Woke up in the middle of the night and saw someone naked and crying in the corner of the room in a squatting position. I almost shat myself. Called 911, went to check up on who it is with a baseball bat, but I couldn't turn the lights on because she was blocking the switch by sitting too close to it. I screamed at her a few times, no response. She was hiding her face with her hands. Finally, she looked up with a blank expression. She cut her hands badly. From the looks of it, there's bloody handprints all over the wall. I'm just standing there in my underwear, shitting myself, and waiting for the cops. Finally, the cops arrive. Paramedics arrive a few minutes later. I get taken into the police station for more questioning. Turns out, she is schizophrenic. She drove 500 miles to get there. I don't know how she turned and found my apartment. She was admitted to a mental ward later.
I know the subject matter is very serious, so I don't mean to make light of it, but I can't be the only one who didn't think about that Proclaimer song, 500 Miles. Come on.
I was driven to Baltimore the day before. I drove through the night to meet up with my girlfriend. We were staying at her brother's house. I got there after lunchtime, took a shower, and her brother took us to dinner. It was a really nice Italian place, lots of good food and wine. Then, we went back to his place and played some games and went to sleep. I don't remember being woken up. I just remember she was mad and telling me to stop yelling. I was like, what? I'm not yelling. What is she talking about? Then she shoved me in the shower to wash the puke off of me. I was out of it from not sleeping, and I guess the wine and food all decided to come up in my sleep. I puked red wine all over her brother's guest bed in my sleep, but I was so tired or drunk that I didn't comprehend what had happened till I was in the shower. F that day. I was also hungover the next morning when we went to the Baltimore Farmers Market, and there was a lot of walking involved. Cool spot, but Jesus, I wasn't feeling well. My brother in the living room with a knife. I wanted a glass of water. I asked him what is he doing, and he told me, shh. Someone was trying to break into our house. He saw them creeping in our yard through the front door, and minutes later, they were jiggling the back door handle. I don't know if I was more afraid of the person breaking in, or my brother being ready to stab them if they did. He had to have been 12 or 13 at the time. Probably bed bugs in an apartment I used to live in. I came home from work one night and passed the F out on my bed for a power nap. I wake up later to the sensation of something crawling on the side of my nose. I brush whatever was there off and look onto my bed sheets to see what had landed. It was a tiny little bug. I thought it was a tick at first, but nope. There were a couple more trying to get back into wherever they were hiding. I started tearing my bedding off and looked down below the bed frame, found like a nest of them tucked down in the wall next to the bed frame. Immediately took all my bedding, pillows, mattress, etc., dragged them out back and threw it all in the dumpster our apartment building had, and slept in the living room on a futon, well away from my bedroom, until I moved out. Landlord couldn't send in any exterminators. Said none wanted to take on the job because of how invasive bedbugs are. I didn't buy that though.